The new Kursk bulge in the context of the Russia-West confrontation. What does Ukraine plan with the breakthrough of its armed forces deep into foreign territory?
Of course, we're talking about Crimea, at the very least, to launch a massive strike on the Crimean bridge.
Life on the edge, like agents Galkin and Smolyaninov, meets love from fans abroad. YouTube strikes back. Bloggers have been demonetized. Where to now? To the factory? Biden is looking for a job.
I'd like to borrow some money from you.
And Trump exposes.
I didn't know she was black until a few years ago when she accidentally became black.
Riots in England. What's the cost of rebellion? The British demand change. The failure of multiculturalism policy.
Now this is our country.
There's nothing you can do about it.
This is the Trends program. We begin. The entry of Ukrainian forces into Russia's Kursk region could be boldly called the Kursk anomaly. So far, Ukraine has no clear answer on the exact goal behind this breakthrough. Moreover, Zelensky remained silent for several days after the events began, not commenting on what was happening. Then he mumbled something like a slap in the face for Russia, but this does not explain the situation or the possible consequences. Lower-ranking military officials make bloodthirsty promises to do something shocking. Ukrainian forces destroyed the last bridge over the same river. They seem to be trying to cut off part of the Glushkovsky district, which could indicate preparations for a new strike on Russia. The most frequent target mentioned for this breakthrough was the Kursk nuclear power plant and the intention to blow up its reactor. However, there are other options.
Russian Ivan.
Hey!
Russian Ivan. How's life? How's life, Russian Ivan? It's hard to believe, but the Ukrainians themselves filmed this video. A Ukrainian soldier in a Nazi helmet from the Third Reich era mockingly taunts an old Russian man with an accent. Ivan, here he is, Ivan!
Girls, I'm 74 years old.
Oh my goodness.
And because of my husband Ivan, I already...
Welcome to Kazakhstan. If a person uses Nazi symbols and phrases like Russian pig as their distinguishing mark, is there any doubt that they also harbor Nazi beliefs? And they publicly spit on the graves of their ancestors who stopped Nazism half a century ago with enormous sacrifices. Degeneration and a completely rewritten generational memory are distinctive features of Ukrainian soldiers sent to die in the Kursk region. Here's another character, hiding his face in a report for the West in Kiev. His dream is to reach the Kremlin.
I have one big wish to write ruined Kremlins on the Kremlin walls. Happily, as it was said in one
Propaganda material for Americans from the Washington Post. They show how Ukrainian forces care for the civilian population in Russia's Kursk region. These are staged fakes. Here's how it really happens. Bags over heads, loading into trucks, beatings with rifles. This is what ordinary fascism looks like today. This is the beginning of the invasion. Ukrainians are shooting at village houses with automatic heavy weapons. There are no military personnel there. Another side of Ukrainian tactics in the Kursk region resembles a mischievous cat. Messing in slippers and hiding under the bed, they mock the border guard's memorial. They shot up the Lenin monument at the House of Culture. But the main entertainment is looting. What can't be taken must be destroyed. Like this store, just for fun.
Do you have Rivnias?
Rivnias. Well done. Come on, Mikhail. Beep.
Can I use a card?
Beep, of course you can. Beep.
Damn no.
This isn't mine. This isn't yours.
Come on, sleep. Beep. 20 hryvnia.
Wow, what a sieve.
Why this happens, Ukrainian soldiers explain post factum. In practice, most of the invading contingent are extremely simple-minded people.
We were given the task to enter the Kursk region. Capture the Kursk region. We were told it would be a walk in the park. No one would resist us. 3 Cougar vehicles entered. 2 Cougar vehicles. The commanders started shooting at houses and civilians.
There are fewer who understand everything, but they exist. They know that the invasion of the Kursk region is a one-way ticket. A cannon fodder mission.
We entered Kursk because we messed up everywhere else. They gathered a good strike force. They just asked, look, we broke through, we're going forward, give us more money, more weapons, let's continue. We can still do something, and also to drag NATO into the war. Specifically NATO, because there's no one left to fight in Ukraine.
We're the last ones.
Now Ukrainian soldiers are massively falling into Russian captivity. Those who don't manage to do so end up stacked in piles. The process is not quick, of course, but the grinding tactic is relentless. We have completely stopped the enemy's advance, and are now destroying them within this isolation circle.
There are many prisoners.
Now about the political side of the invasion of the Kursk region. Illegitimate Zelensky constantly changes the goal. Sometimes it's for the morale of the Ukrainian forces, sometimes to distract Russian troops, sometimes to create favorable conditions for negotiations. In reality, things are bad for him. Even supporters like foreign agent Yulia Latinina state. Zelensky's strategy is escalation up to nuclear war. So the official Kiev is losing its mind.
The only strategy of President Zelensky now is an attempt to escalate up to nuclear war. So that's the idea of the Americans.
This is straight Kremlin propaganda, Yulia.
Well, what can you do, sorry, but how is it? And tell me why then hit the over-the-horizon radar? Why organize all these RDK raids? The calculation is that Putin will get angry, do something, and in response, they can complain. They can rely on the West instead of themselves. And this is Zelensky's characteristic strategy lately. He sees that things are not going well on the front, so he tries various forms of escalation.
Alexander Lukashenko also spoke about the motives that pushed the Ukrainian side to invade Russian territory in a recent interview.
I know for sure that Ukraine would be very happy if Russia or we used tactical nuclear weapons there. That would be a blessing. Then probably we would have no allies left. Not even sympathetic countries, because they are immersed in what's happening. And secondly, it's nuclear weapons. We already have a certain negative image of nuclear weapons. They want to push us. The war has dragged on, and the gift the West received in this situation, they will never refuse. The opportunity to bring down Russia. Ukraine won't do it, but who? The West, NATO.
The Battle of Kursk 2024 has been going on for 2 weeks, longer than Hitler's Operation Citadel in 1943. It turns out that the Wehrmacht command realized the failure of the offensive sooner than Zelensky does today. And this saved Nazi Germany another 22 months of life. What will happen next, we'll find out soon.
So what is the real goal of the Ukrainian offensive in the Kursk region? Let's talk with military expert Andrei Klinsevich. Andrei, hello. There are so many versions around the Ukrainian invasion of Russia. In your opinion, what goal is the Ukrainian side pursuing? To strike the Kursk nuclear power plant? Control the gas measuring station in Suja? Or is it a maneuver to improve Zelensky's negotiating position?
Ukraine's operation in the north, in the Kursk region, generally has multiple goals. This includes disinformation, throwing out a large number of various fakes, and so on. They shake our society, they create panic, including in the Kursk region and other regions. And of course the mental component, changing the goal setting, changing the stable, so to speak, fundamental beliefs, including in the strength of their armed forces, in the leadership of their country. This is what they are achieving now. As for military goals, why did they go there? The question is related to the Kursk nuclear power plant. Firstly, it's hard to reach, but most importantly, it will be very difficult to sell this to the Western electorate, especially the American. We understand that Ukraine is now acting in the wake of the US presidential race. The White House, the Democrats who control it, I'm sure made an offer to Zelensky, saying, "Buddy, help us win these elections. In 2025, you'll have weapons and money. If you can't show something on the front, well, we'll lose together. Trump will come. Not only will you have no resources, but you'll also be jailed. They'll take everything you've stolen." So now Zelensky is creating a beautiful, victorious picture. I think this is not the end of the story. I think the West set a more global task for Ukraine. Most likely it's about Crimea. At the very least, to launch a massive strike on the Crimean bridge, or maybe even move towards Crimea and the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, which they consider theirs. Therefore, to get closer to impose battles at this station is one of Zelensky's tasks. By the way, for these tasks, Canada and Germany handed over dozens of kilometers of pontoon bridges to Ukraine, just to build crossings over the Dnieper, the Kherson region, or the Kakhovka Reservoir.
An amazing story was also thrown into the information field. The American newspaper Wall Street Journal reported, Ukraine is responsible for the explosion of the Nord Streams, cutting Germany off from cheap gas. It is reported that the idea of the terrorist attack was born in high offices in Kiev. The executors were Ukrainian divers, former commander-in-chief of the Ukrainian Armed Forces Valery Zaluzhny, and Poland. The first dived with the bomb, the second gave the order, and the third covered the criminals. However, at the last moment, writes the American newspaper, they wanted to cancel the operation. But neither official Kiev nor Poland, nor even the USA could do it. So it turned out that the Nord Streams were blown up against their will. The Polish prosecutor's office confirmed that it received an arrest warrant for a Ukrainian wanted by Germany as a suspect. But the problem is he left the country. The reaction of Polish Prime Minister Tusk is interesting. He personally wrote that the existence of gas pipelines contradicted the interests of the EU, Poland, and Ukraine. Both the initiators and the construction should apologize and be silent, translating it into human terms. Germany, the gas pipeline should go not directly to your country via water, but overland through Poland, with corresponding payments to Poland. Everyone who doesn't like it, shut up. Andre, why has the West reopened the topic of the Nord Streams, which everyone seemed to have given up on? Is this a signal that Zelensky is being abandoned?
I remember that Germany is a participant in the Nord Stream consortium. And in this situation, honestly, I recalled an article by one of those strategic consulting American agencies, which is the main contractor of the White House for developing future strategies. By the way, in January 2020, they were the ones who talked about how to deplete the European economy and so on. In 2023, they wrote that the future image of the USA does not coincide with the Ukrainian one, and that it is in America's interest to end the conflict after the presidential elections in America, because otherwise it could escalate into a large-scale conflict with unpredictable scenarios. How can you get the opposing sides to the negotiating table so that they at least sign a political settlement, if not a peace agreement, to stop the fighting? And they present various options, saying that changing the president in Russia or doing something else won't help. They will continue on this course.
Conclusion.
We need to influence President Zelensky. But if he doesn't listen, he needs to be replaced. Therefore, the only way to convince him is to promise him more money after the political settlement than he is getting now. Because he is making money off it. But I do not rule out that American strategists have concluded that after the presidential elections, when Biden can be removed, and Zelensky's so-called compromising material on the Biden family no longer matters, Kamala Harris cannot be blackmailed with it. Then Zelensky needs to be removed and replaced with another person. Someone adequate with whom the Russians can be brought to the negotiating table to agree on stopping the fighting. And the groundwork for his removal may already be starting now through the Nord Streams.
To summarize, does the offensive of the Ukrainian armed forces in the Kursk region have real military significance for the course of the confrontation, or is it more of a PR story to create
By the way, let me remind you,
noise?
it's 2023. Ukraine's counteroffensive, which they widely announced back then, they no longer do now. They have learned from their mistakes. They are doing the same thing. The first strike was in the direction of Artemovsk, also known as Bakhmut. Sersky threw 5 brigades there to unblock the city. And there were very heavy battles there, and we had to transfer reserves there. And after that, they were probing the defense, hitting in the direction of Tokmak. America and Ukraine pay great attention to informational and psychological operations. Moreover, they always do. First comes the informational buildup, then events on the ground, and then the informational operation in the media space completes or supports this operation. By the way, money for these purposes is allocated through the U.S. Department of Defense. Let me remind you that this year they allocated about $6 billion for the so-called expenses to counter Russian disinformation. All activities related to discrediting the authorities in Russia and Belarus are financed under this. So all these Polish, Baltic, various Russian or Belarusian information agencies, allegedly consisting of such outcasts of their society, are financed by the Americans through a number of intermediaries. So the informational operation conducted and continuing in the Kursk region is also these same events.
Thank you. That was military expert Andrei Klinsevich. Yes, and judging by the publications of the German media, the German government is going to let the investigation of the Nord Stream pipeline attacks slide. The overseas life of Russian foreign agents is becoming increasingly nerve-wracking. On the one hand, there is a clear understanding that they are of no interest to anyone there except the immigrant public, which means they have to give and even beg for any concerts just to earn money. And this rule applies to both Semyon Slepakov and Maxim Galkin. Another thing is that even there, people are willing to spend 200 euros to buy tickets for the first time. And tell Galkin, who has already left Israel, what they think of him. Galkin couldn't quickly come up with a sharp response to such a bold remark. Oh, you came here on purpose?
Yes, I came on purpose.
Did you buy a ticket for this row?
Bought a ticket for the front row to come and say that.
Thank you. Your money will benefit my family.
Really?
Even with your opinion.
Wonderful. Listen, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Of course, thank you. Thank you. An interesting social phenomenon. It turns out Galkin is willing to endure being called a fool for the sake of money for his family. Blogger Maxim Winkler has taken it upon himself to ruin the days of expatriates abroad. Before Galkin and Yermola, he had already driven actor and foreign agent Artur Smolyaninov to a state of rage in Berlin, who claimed he would fight for the Ukrainian armed forces after fleeing Russia.
Hey, is that you, Art? The artist who screams against Russia.
Sit here, you bum. Come here, damn it.
Of course, come here. Winkler explains to journalists that he wants to convey to foreign agents that they are now strangers in Russia. And apparently, Smolyanov and Galkin are not the last on his list. Well, a form of public censure, it seems, can be like this, not just with Lexus and Vovan, as they say. YouTube struck back. After Roskomnadzor slowed down the video service, Google, which owns the platform, completely disabled monetization for Russian users. That is, they will no longer pay a percentage from ad views. The AdSense contextual advertising service has existed since 2003, and due to Google's enormous influence on the global internet, it is the largest. It allows automatic placement of text and graphic ads on websites that match the context of the information on the sites. Now the shop is closed. Absolutely all Runet website owners will no longer be able to earn money by placing AdSense network ad blocks on their portals. Bloggers on YouTube are in the same situation. Users joke, now bloggers can say one thing about AdSense ads, you're done. Here, the literal name of the service is played upon, YouTube. The future is yours, bloggers. With these words, the still president of the USA, Joe Biden, welcomed the modern rulers of the media sphere in the White House. Hundreds of digital content creators discussed monetization, artificial intelligence, and the impact of social networks on mental health. In general, the State Department is not inviting TikTokers and other influencers to the political heart of America for the first time. If you look at the numbers, it really is a media army. Biden openly flirted with the youth. The jokes were well written for him, and in the end, he even hinted that he was looking for a job.
More and more people are going into this business rather than any other. What do you think? Where should I go when I retire? I have good connections. I'm joking, but my assistants told me that the turnover of the creative economy today is $250 billion. I'd like to borrow some money from you. I need it, and in the next 2 years, this sphere will double. That's why I invited you to the White House. I'm looking for a job.
Biden's refusal to run for re-election is the first case in decades where a sitting U.S. president decided not to run again, having the opportunity. Apparently he was very convincingly asked. Instead, Kamala Harris, an amazing woman. During the previous presidential race, she accused Biden of supporting racists. But realizing she was losing, she flattered him so much that he made her the first woman in history to be vice president. Until recently, she was seriously criticized in the media for her controversial activities as Attorney General, for her indifference to police violence and prison overcrowding, for conducting investigations with violations, for her particularly harsh interrogation style, and numerous sentences for marijuana-related crimes, which Kamala, according to her own words, also smoked in college and then proposed to fully legalize. Kamala was involved in a series of scandals, including those with a sex prefix. And Americans often criticized her for her abrupt changes in views, fake smile, often out of place and absurd statements. Today, Kamala Harris has serious chances of becoming the next U.S. president and the first female president in U.S. history.
Kamala Harris, prosecutor, senator, the first woman vice president of the USA, and a candidate for the highest state post in the country. Her mother came to study in the States from India, her father from Jamaica. Both became scientists. Her parents divorced when little Kamala was 7 years old. In 1986, Harris graduated from Howard University in Washington. In 1989, she received a law degree from the University of California and joined the state bar. 9 years of working in the Alameda Homicide Division exhausted Kamala. Thanks to the help of her friend, Dick Eaglehart, she transferred from the 70,000-strong town to the administrative center of the state, San Francisco. She didn't stay long as an assistant district attorney, moved to the mayor's office, where she worked under the patronage of the married Mayor Willie Brown, who many years later admitted that he was Harris's lover and helped her build her career through the bed. A few years later, she became the district attorney prosecutor of San Francisco. It was then that the well-known Soros noticed the girl, made an offer she couldn't refuse, and the political career of the immigrant's daughter took off. In 2011, Harris became the Attorney General of the entire state. In almost 3 decades in positions with the prefix prosecutor, Harris amassed an enviable list of scandals, remembered as an active defender of judicial errors, even when they were proven, and thousands of indignant people called for justice. She repeatedly tried to imprison the innocent, concealed and hushed up cases of sexual harassment by her subordinates, violated state laws, and hid the names of those accused of molesting minors by Catholic priests. After the scandal with the abuses by priests, she did not initiate a single case. Of the 50 largest cities in America, San Francisco was the only one where not a single criminal case was initiated. She hid everything. According to Schweitzer's works, Harris turned a blind eye to the antics of the San Francisco elite. Once cocaine disappeared in a case, another time, those accused of pedophilia escaped punishment. An elite strip club caught providing brothel services went unpunished. Harris was suspected of aiding in the trafficking of minors. In 2022, Patrick Howley and Ben De Laurentiis made an hour-long documentary showing the underbelly of the child rescue service where, in Nice. But Harris's prosecutorial career would not have ended if not for a new one initiated by Soros, who in 2016 donated money to his protégé's Senate campaign. The investments paid off. She actively promoted the Minnesota Freedom Fund, owned by Soros. The organization posted bail for arrested criminals and rioters. So to speak, they didn't abandon their own. In 2020, just 4 days after the police station was burned during the riots in Minneapolis, Kamala's fund raised $42 million to bail out radicals. 65 criminals were released, who later ended up back behind bars for more serious crimes, including murders. In 2021, Biden appointed Harris as vice president, but she failed all the tasks assigned to her. The programs developed under Kamala's leadership to reduce the flow of refugees only led to an increase. She actively supported the green agenda, but proposed rather strange solutions.
When we invest in clean energy, electric vehicles, and reduce the population, more of our children can breathe clean air and drink clean water.
Western media called her speeches word salads. During a public appearance under the CNN banner in 2019, Harris didn't answer any questions, only repeating the phrase, "I'm open to conversation." Unsurprisingly, a year later, her approval rating was 37%. This is one of the worst ratings in the history of U.S. vice presidents. Harris's speeches are particularly charming due to her manner of laughing. Donald Trump even nicknamed the vice president Laughing Kamala and said she laughs like a madwoman. By the way, American press has published articles suggesting that Harris might have a mental disorder. Specialists point out that uncontrollable bursts of laughter are symptoms of gelastic seizures. To boost her statistics, the vice president, now a candidate for the top post, actively manipulates her racial identity. When convenient, she's Indian. When not, she's African American. I didn't know she was black until a few years ago when she suddenly became black. In her biography, Harris emphasizes her life in a poor family and the difficulties related to interracial relationships, but she omits something important. On her Jamaican side, she is a descendant of Irish slave owner Gordon Brown. This is well known, but leading American media won't report it.
Trump's main competitor, Harris, is again being obstructed. Previously, it was the destruction of his internet pages, denial of TV airtime, and legal prosecutions. Now, materials about an assassination attempt on him mysteriously disappear from the internet. And a recent interview with Elon Musk was attempted to be disrupted. First, by a massive cyber attack, it started with a delay of more than 40 minutes. Second, EU Commissioner Thierry Breton urged Musk to censor the interview with Trump. Allegedly, EU legislation requires moderating content that could negatively impact the public space, such as freedom of speech, and there was something to listen to. The conversation was conducted via voice traffic, without video. Trump said Biden was forced to leave against his will. Harris is even more incompetent than the current American president, and the greatest threat to humanity, according to Trump, is nuclear warming, not global warming.
We have a defective government. These are defective people. These are not the people who should be running it. And frankly, I think she's more incompetent than he is. She's had 3.5 years. And by the way, they have another 5 months to do something, but they won't do anything. It's all talk. This was a coup of the President of the United States. He didn't want to leave, and they said we can do this the easy way or the hard way. Yes, I mean, they just took him behind the barn and basically shot him. What did they do to this guy? And I'm not a fan of his. He was a terrible president, the worst president in history. He lost the debates. You know, the biggest threat is not global warming, when the ocean is going to rise by 1.8 inches over the next 400 years. The biggest threat is nuclear warming, because now we have 5 countries with significant nuclear power.
In Germany, they decided to make some Nazis, Wehrmacht officers, and SS troops of the Third Reich heroes. That is, to set them as examples for the German military. German Defense Ministry Representative Arne Kolatz stated that the list of military traditions would include 25 fascists. Among them is Hitler's favorite, pilot Erich Hartmann, who shot down 352 planes, 344 Soviet, and 8 American. Well, if such characters are proposed as examples in Germany, it explains a lot about modern German politics. Previously, countries like the USA or the UK claimed to be a melting pot that digests multicultural differences, making everyone the same, equal. However, movements like Black Lives Matter in the USA and now riots in Britain prove the opposite. The policy of multiculturalism has failed. People in these countries are divided into segments, into us and them, and at some point, when they come into contact with each other, a social explosion occurs. The largest riots in the UK in the last 13 years erupted after the murder of 3 little girls in the northwest of England in the town of Southport. The police quickly arrested a 17-year-old teenager, Axel Mugamba Rudakubana, who grew up in a family of immigrants from Rwanda. People took to the streets, including New Britons, that is, migrants who received UK passports. In response, they organized Muslim patrols, which began to engage in street fights with protesters, with over 1,000 people detained. Sadly, the demographic situation in most developed European countries is quite dire. The population is increasing mainly due to migrants. According to the Office for National Statistics in England and Wales, it grew by almost 610,000 people due to migrants. This is the highest figure since 1949. But natural population change, on the contrary, has reached a 45-year low. That is, there were only 400 more births than deaths. How did Britain feel the sting of the riot?
They got what they fought for. Flirting with immigration policy has practically led Britain to a social catastrophe. Think about it. About 1.5 of the population of the Foggy Albion are people with roots far from this land. And it would be fine, but many of these newcomers, whom the haughty English perceived as cheap labor, decided not to assimilate but to live exclusively by their own, sometimes far from old world rules. For a long time, both the government and citizens tried to turn a blind eye to what was happening, which was perceived as a sign of weakness. And now, migrants with foreign cultures and ideologies are increasingly prevailing in British society by force.
Now this is our country.
You can't do anything about it. It's no surprise that at some point this bubble of tolerance burst. Protests erupted across Britain, triggered by the murder of 3 little girls in Southport near Liverpool. Rumors spread on social media that the killer was an illegal immigrant. Riots like a chain reaction began in Birmingham, Liverpool, and a dozen other major cities. But all this discontent, spiced with violence, did not lead to immediate government action against uncontrolled migration. Instead, the protesters were arrested. And now even more concessions are being prepared for migrants, So much so that the police are already kneeling before some of them. Surprisingly, the British press does not see the deep problems in all this. The Telegraph writes that the riots in the country have nothing to do with dissatisfaction with immigration. Allegedly, most of the participants in the actions are representatives of the white lower class, who read as marginals, whom the authorities simply forgot to take care of, giving preference to newcomers. And they, either out of envy or unable to bear the humiliation, rushed into battle, largely unequal.
Exactly.
Be that as it may, now more than 1,000 people with British passports are behind bars. Sentences are being handed out en masse. As they say, if there's a person, a reason will be found. From participating in riots to posts on social media, it turns out that the internet, according to the authorities, fueled the protests. Therefore, the country urgently needs to tighten the law restricting the spread of illegal, provocative content on social media. In other words, make them sterile. After all, who knows what information? Information can be equated to extremist.
A 55-year-old woman was arrested today on suspicion of publishing written materials inciting racial hatred and false messages.
She is currently in police custody. According to the senior superintendent, this is related to a message that incited hatred. The protest was fueled by malicious and inaccurate messages on the internet. This is a harsh reminder of the dangers of posting information on social media.
Certain analogies come to mind, don't they? But over there, beyond the borders, everything is different. Democracy, after all. By the way, British justice also targeted children. A 15-year-old faces up to 10 years in prison. His role in the riots was upgraded from participation to organization. And the youngest defendants are two 12-year-old boys. For reference, criminal responsibility in democratic England starts at 10 years old. Everyone involved in these riots should understand you were wrong, you shouldn't have done it, and you will feel the full force of the law, which I hope we have already demonstrated with swift trials. As for the migrants, they are doing well. Just last week, about 1,500 new arrivals came to Britain by boat across the English Channel. And last year, the population of the Foggy Albion increased by about 30,000 in the same way. British authorities spend several million pounds a day just on their accommodation and maintenance. However, let's be honest, some attempts to combat illegal migration in Britain are still being made. For a decade now, but unsuccessfully. Something always gets in the way. Either the pandemic, the economic downturn, the labor shortage, or something else. Sunak was seriously planning to send migrants to Rwanda, but didn't manage to. In the rest of flourishing Europe, the situation is even worse. The ideology of many countries is to protect all the disadvantaged, without exception. And newcomers, seeing such an attitude, constantly want more. Many of them think simply, if you pay me, then you are weak, and that means I set the rules.
And finally, about the leaders whose opinions are fed to us. The icon of American feminism, Gloria Steinem, turned out to be a CIA agent. Her task was to weed out class struggle discussions from the feminist movement and focus all the movement's activity on gender issues and only gender issues. Gloria was recruited in the 1950s, after which Steinem spent 2 years in India as an Asian Fellow of Chester Bowles, and upon returning to the States, she was involved in sending American students abroad to disrupt world youth festivals organized by the Soviet Union. The CIA helped her career, making her an author for the trendy magazine Esquire. Interviewing stars like John Lennon, she also became famous and by 1966 was considered America's leading feminist. She was a co-founder of the National Women's Political Association. For many decades, it was a filter for women aspiring to elected and appointed positions in the U.S. government. This was the Trends program. All the best.